Huge thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. More from them in a bit. So Xbox has not been doing too hot over the past 10 years or so. Okay, maybe you like the games, the exclusives, the ecosystem, that's fine. I just mean from like a business standpoint, things aren't going well. You gotta keep in mind, Microsoft is a multi-trillion-dollar corporation, and they're well known for shutting down various divisions and canceling projects, and just overall trimming the fat when stuff doesn't perform to expectations. Honestly, the fact that the Xbox brand still exists at all, considering how willing Microsoft is to cancel everything, is actually pretty amazing. But yeah, the numbers don't lie. The Series S and X have been performing really badly in terms of sales, especially if you're just talking about the more expensive Series X. Even still, I'd argue all of this has been handled pretty well by Microsoft's public relations and their marketing. They've done a good job throwing out numbers about how Xbox is actually growing, even if those numbers are a little bit misleading. But now they can't really hide from the fact that things are just not going well, and they're starting to shift their focus to something new. Xbox without the console. I've actually argued myself that it doesn't make a ton of sense for Microsoft to make another traditional Xbox. We can sit here all day and say that sales figures don't matter, but they do. But rather than admit this, rather than admit that publishers and developers themselves are questioning the future of Xbox, Microsoft has remained extremely vague about this whole situation. They are constantly dodging very important questions, ignoring massive concerns that fans have about the future of the brand. However, there is one consistent message they keep trying to convey to us. The future of Xbox isn't on the Xbox. And today, I want to talk about that. I'm not very organized, but I want to be. And I want to try to use Google Sheets to do that. But like, look at this, it's kind of complicated. There's lots of weird words and letters and numbers, and it hurts my brain. And that's why I'm glad that I have Skillshare to help me learn how to use this thing. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives with thousands of courses across different topics, ranging from video editing to animation to interior design, creating music, and so much more. Whether you want to improve skills that you use every day for your career or jump right into a new hobby, Skillshare can teach you the fundamentals or let you master your craft. I really like Skillshare's learning paths, which go through in detail the ins and outs of a subject. So I've been watching Google Sheets 2024 Learn Everything You Need to Know by Kevin O'Brien, who actually worked as a Google technical support agent. And pretty quickly I learned what stuff like rows and columns are and how to make this fancy chart. Look at that. Recently, Skillshare has gotten some big improvements, including smarter class categories, new class topics, and the ability to find classes easily when trying to learn a specific software program. I think Skillshare is a great and easy way to learn about so many different topics, and I highly recommend checking them out. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Get started today. Okay, so before I get into all of this, everything I'm talking about is rooted to some degree in just my own personal opinion. I can look at all the statistics and try to use my big brain to figure out the logic of the situation, but really I'm just spitballing here. For all I know, Microsoft is completely content with the Xbox sales figures. Sure, from my eyes, Game Pass seems like a giant money pit. I see it as a warning sign when they are actively developing games for competitors' platforms. But maybe I'm just missing something. Microsoft themselves have said that a next-gen Xbox is getting made. Now, whether this is actually a traditional game console or just a Windows PC that boots into the Xbox app, we don't really know. Maybe it's like a Amazon Fire Stick that connects to the cloud. Who knows? I don't. But rather than speculate on the things that we don't know, I think we should talk about the stuff that Microsoft right now should be addressing. So rumors started to pop up a little bit ago that Xbox was basically just gonna leave the Middle East, and Saudi Arabia specifically. As you might expect, Xbox is not a huge seller over there. But with rumors popping up that Microsoft might simply abandon this market, it suggests that Microsoft could also be taking the Xbox out of other markets as well. These rumors had some validity to them. but it was denied by a blogger who generally does get information and leaks correct about Xbox. Problem is, this specific blogger only seems to get information correct when it's about positive news for the Xbox brand. Why do I bring this guy up then? Well, he works for Windows Central, which was granted an exclusive quote from Microsoft about the whole situation. Xbox devices are available in all current Xbox hardware-supported countries, including Saudi Arabia. Console availability may vary by country, but Xbox games can be played on consoles, PCs, and on phones, tablets, or TVs where Xbox Cloud Gaming is available. Okay, so this is pretty much your standard corporate non-statement. Like, yeah, Xbox devices are available in all current Xbox hardware-supported countries. By definition, that's what available means. The question was not whether Xboxes currently exist in these countries, it's whether they would continue to be supported. And this was just straight up ignored. What's even more concerning is that there's a particular emphasis on non-console ways to play Xbox games in the future, which kind of reinforces the idea that maybe Microsoft is planning to move out of this region. And honestly, yeah, this isn't a huge surprise. I'm sure it's very disappointing to Xbox fans in the region, but in terms of sales, Xbox is not doing well. Like I said, things aren't really doing that great for Xbox in general. Things aren't even doing that great for Xbox in the United States, but abroad, internationally, Xbox is kind of a dead brand. Okay, so let's take Japan. Something like the Switch OLED model, specifically just the OLED model, sold like 38,000 units in a week. In the same week, the Xbox Series X sold 94. Not 94,000, just 94 throughout the entire country. Of course, it's well known that Xbox just doesn't sell very well over there. But even in Europe, things aren't doing that great. Now, since Microsoft doesn't like to say how much the Xbox sells officially, we do have to use potentially unreliable third-party sources like VG charts. But just from this alone, we can kind of guess that the market share for Xbox in Europe is not only declining, but almost into the single-digit range. That's not good. That is really, really bad, especially when you consider the two other competitors hold nearly 90% of the market. If Xbox was a soft drink, it obviously wouldn't be Coca-Cola, nor would it be Pepsi or Dr. Pepper. It would be other. Xbox is the Kroger root beer of the console industry. So why are things going this badly? If you look back to 2020 with the release of the Series S and Series X, people were pretty optimistic about the future of the Xbox brand. Now, I'll admit, I was one of the people convinced that Xbox was ready to finally break out, to hold its own against Sony for the first time in a long time, because Microsoft actually seemed like it was getting serious about gaming. Remember when Microsoft bought Bethesda? That was a big deal. At the time, it was one of the biggest deals in gaming, both figuratively and literally. The idea that one of the console manufacturers would now own the publisher that made titles like Doom and Wolfenstein, Quake, Fallout, not to mention Elder Scrolls. This seemed like it could single-handedly change the fate of the Xbox brand. This acquisition was just a complete disaster. I mean, think about it. Right after the deal happened, after Microsoft got Bethesda, the next two games, Deathloop and Ghostwire, were actually received quite well, with one of them being a legitimate Game of the Year contender. But both of these games were actually PlayStation timed exclusives due to previous contractual obligations. Xbox, on the other hand, got smaller releases with Pentiment, which was received well but came and went without getting noticed beyond the Game Pass crowd, and Hi-Fi Rush, which was a surprise hit, and then the studio was shut down by Microsoft. Existing games like Elder Scrolls Online and Fallout 76 continued to be playable on other platforms, so what you're really left with was Redfall, which was probably one of the biggest embarrassments in gaming history at the time, and Starfield. Starfield. I think it's easy to forget today how important Starfield was supposed to be. This was a game, a new property coming from the same studio that made Fallout 3 and 4 and Oblivion and Skyrim. The first entry in a new franchise that could go on for decades. Bethesda presented this as a third pillar next to the Fallout and Elder Scrolls properties. But yeah, I I don't think that's gonna happen. Okay, when I first started Starfield, I didn't think it was that bad. I thought it was underwhelming, half-baked, sure, whatever. But I figured with enough time, Bethesda would try and turn this thing around. I mean, remember how much people hated Final Fantasy XIV and Cyberpunk and No Man's Sky back when those released? Yeah, Starfield wasn't getting great reviews and it certainly wasn't selling a lot of Xboxes. But if it got a new life, new resurgence after some major updates and a relaunch, I thought maybe, you know, it could bring more people to Xbox. But Bethesda is Bethesda. They already had a chance to relaunch the game with new DLC, Shattered Space. It seems like those that did buy Shattered Space just thought it was bad, or of the same, if not worse. Rather than accept fans' criticisms of Starfield, it seems like Bethesda executives, higher-ups, game directors just didn't really seem to care about any of these complaints. And honestly, recent quotes don't inspire confidence that the team is going to fix any of these problems. I don't know if it's ego, complacency, or what, but I think most people have accepted that Starfield will probably never be a great game, and Elder Scrolls 6 might not even be very good. To be fair, the Bethesda acquisition was about more than just Bethesda Game Studios, the guys that make the RPGs. There are two highly anticipated games coming from the larger publisher. You have Doom: The Dark Ages and the new Indiana Jones game, both of which are going to be on PlayStation. So what was the point of the Bethesda deal then? All that ended up happening was that Bethesda made some critically well-received titles for PlayStation, a few niche titles for the Xbox itself, got a studio shut down, made some critically panned titles, and then they just went multi-platform, making the entire acquisition kind of pointless. You cannot tell me that this was all a part of some Microsoft grand plan, and neither was the death of Halo. Yeah, of course I have to talk about this. So if you haven't heard, Xbox recently announced that they're kind of rebooting Halo as a thing. It makes sense. Like, we knew Infinite was dying. It was not really gonna get that many more major updates. The TV show got canceled because, yeah. And after so much of 343 Industries leadership had just left the company, something had to change. So they took 343 Industries, renamed it to Halo Studios, took that Slipspace engine that was built off of the broken remains of previous Halo engines, and just moved over to Unreal. And so far, from what we've seen, things look pretty impressive. I mean, the graphics at least look impressive. That's all we've really seen. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and say that I am 100% confident that this will turn Halo back into some major franchise, but it's possible. I mean, it seems like they have a real plan in place, but don't expect this to change the fate of Xbox. Yeah, we've known about this for a while. I've even talked about it, but it sounds like Microsoft is really considering putting the next Halo entry on PlayStation. Now, I, again, myself, have said this is a good move. This is a smart move. You should put Halo on PlayStation. And this is the ideal direction, in my opinion, for the future of the franchise. But we can't ignore the optics. Putting Halo on PlayStation is basically the closest you'll ever get to Microsoft saying, okay, Xbox is dead, we give up, right? But honestly, I think they might have to say that anyway here pretty soon. In recent statements, Microsoft continues to push for this idea that Xbox will exist in the future beyond the console. Specifically, Microsoft's attention has once again turned to the cloud. Remember that? Remember the cloud? I'm so sick of the cloud. Okay, on occasion, I actually do partake in cloud-based gaming, but usually it's out of necessity. Like on the PS5, if you want to play PS3 games, you got to do that on the cloud because the PS3 cell processor was just kind of weird, so it's hard to emulate. On my Xbox, I don't bother installing Flight Simulator because it's just such a big game. It has such a huge file size. And since it's already kind of an always online sort of game, you might as well just, you know, use the cloud. Sure, there might be some latency, but who cares? It's Flight Simulator. I knew people that played Cyberpunk on Nvidia's GeForce Now service because their PCs just weren't powerful enough to play the game. There is a time and place for this technology, but considering the latency, the stuttering, the general issues that cloud-based gaming will probably always have, it's not ideal for everybody. For a while there, I was naive enough to assume that Microsoft was actually coming to its senses and ready to accept that the cloud would be a niche product. If you don't remember, there was a time where the CMA was trying to block the Activision acquisition by Microsoft. They were concerned that maybe potentially in the future, the cloud might be the main way that people play video games. And if that was the case, Microsoft was kind of monopolizing the industry. Microsoft responded by saying, hey, actually the cloud isn't doing that well. It's not that popular. People don't seem to like it. We don't even know for sure whether there will be a future for this. But it seems like those quotes were just to try to get the CMA off their back, because now that they actually did acquire Activision, they are heavily investing in the cloud. Pretty sneaky, but I don't think this is gonna work. I find it funny that while Xbox Cloud Gaming is probably the most well-known cloud gaming platform, it's also kind of the worst. I'm not talking about in the games that you can play. I mean, like, the actual service is just bad. There's technical reasons for this, including bit rates, the fact that the company uses the Series S version of games for streaming, as opposed to the Series X version. So generally speaking, games look and play worse on the Xbox Cloud than just about any other cloud streaming service. I suspect the reason for this is because Microsoft expects their service to get way more users in the future than the other platforms. They are preparing for tens or hundreds of millions of users, or billions of users. And they've set lower specifications, lower bit rates, using less demanding versions of these games to prepare for that potential future. And now we're starting to see their big push. If you didn't know, because of legal things, government regulations, Google and Apple now have to start allowing other companies to have their own app stores on iPhones and Androids. So before this point, every time you bought anything from an app on a phone that you downloaded through Google Play Store or Apple App Store, a percentage of that transaction would go to Google or Apple. Okay, technically there were kind of ways around this, ways that you could download apps not through the App Store, but it was less convenient than just using the App Store. Either way, Microsoft can now make their own kind of Xbox app available on phones, or at least on Android. I don't know if Apple's gonna play ball with this. And what this app would allow for is users could buy and play Xbox games on their phone. Sounds cool. Maybe? Microsoft at least thinks so. They insist that this is amazing. This is great. Now, some of you Xbox fans might be out there saying, we could do that already. Yeah, that was a thing you've been able to do for years, but you could only play games that were available on Game Pass through the cloud. Now Microsoft is trying to make the larger Xbox library all accessible through the cloud. You might be asking, why? Well, it seems like Microsoft is trying to push this as more than just a new feature. I mean, again, take a look at Microsoft's response to those concerns about Xbox being discontinued in the Middle East. And you see that the cloud was mentioned as a legitimate alternative to the console. People have been complaining that Microsoft has not been transparent in addressing concerns about the future of the Xbox brand. But honestly, I think they are. I think this is the future of the Xbox brand. It's just not what anybody really wanted. This Xbox Anywhere stuff, Xbox without the console, it is the new marketing approach for this thing. Executives have been salivating over this idea that in the future, billions of people will play games through smart TVs and phones over the internet. They seem to think that right now the only reason that consoles and high-end PCs are limited in their appeal is because of a barrier of entry. Specifically, this idea that a game console requires an upfront cost of a few $100s. These executives think that if they can remove that barrier and simply allow users to play games by signing up for a service and booting games through some app on their TV or smartphone and then stream it through the cloud, well, they could make a lot of money by getting a lot of people who otherwise would never take a second glance at their Xbox. Now, this is stupid. This is absolutely delusional. This is what happens when you don't understand your product or your audience. Microsoft seems to be hoping that the mobile gaming crowd, the 3 billion people or so who downloaded Subway Surfers for free, are somehow going to pay $70 to buy the next Elder Scrolls to play on their phones with a touchscreen. That will not work. That's not going to work. These are not the same audience. The reason that these mobile gamers aren't playing your games is not because they don't own a console. It's because the games they play are free, and this costs money. And even if these games were free, they aren't interested in those kinds of games. They are just not the same market. There's also other reasons why I think a lot of people are confident that this plan might not work. Okay, see, we already know that people who buy video games generally don't want to buy video games that you can only stream through the cloud. They just don't. They don't want to pay money for a game that they do not own, that has to be streamed over the internet. And the reason we know this is because somebody actually tried it. Remember Google Stadia, Microsoft? It didn't happen that long ago, and it didn't work out that well. Yet this seems to be exactly what they're doing here, trying to get people to buy games to stream them over the cloud. Xbox's service is slightly different. This cloud thing will include titles that Xbox owners already own, right? Like if you've been a dedicated Xbox fan for years, maybe this whole concept sounds pretty neat. The ability to be able to play most of your library from anywhere. Games that you already own. No additional purchase necessary, just another nice benefit for being in the Xbox ecosystem. But see, if you're thinking this, you are not Microsoft's target demographic for this product. No, Microsoft isn't doing this to cater to existing customers. They want to expand the user base. That's the entire purpose of the cloud, of cloud gaming, to try to get people that don't own a game console into the ecosystem. And for these people, this cloud streaming solution would still offer the same value proposition as Google Stadia, which again, failed for obvious reasons. There's just not really some group of people who are willing to jump into Space Marine 2 on the subway on their phones controlled via touchscreen while it's rendered unplayable due to poor internet connection. If somebody did want to play these games, they would have to have access to a fast internet connection, which for most people is only accessible at home, where they likely already own a game console. Maybe I'm overthinking this. After all, Microsoft did say another Xbox is coming, another Xbox is in development. And while we don't really know anything about it beyond some dubious claims, there's no reason to assume that they're just lying about this. Yet it's just so hard for me to accept the fact that they would actually make another Series X, you know? But even if they are, I don't really get what the play is here. Obviously, it doesn't personally affect me whether the next Xbox sells well, but I have started to lose all faith in the future of this whole Xbox thing. Okay, so really it started back when Microsoft announced that Xbox games were coming to PlayStation. After that point, I quit buying games on Xbox. And it's not because I'm one of these people who boycotted Xbox for betraying me, for fraternizing with the enemy in the console war. No, I just did it because it really seemed like the beginning of the end. Look, there was tons of ways to examine this move, from a strategic long-term solution for the stability of Microsoft's intellectual properties, to a way to generate revenue from live services and microtransactions across multiple platforms. But at the end of the day, we all know what this meant. You don't bring your games to the competitor's platform when things are going really well. And if you do, you have to be as clear and concise as possible when defining what those titles might be. Microsoft has not done that. They've only continued to make vague statements, and the only benefit to doing this is to hide the truth. Because if it was revealed what they were probably planning on doing, it might do way more damage than just staying silent. I'm just saying, when everybody is so concerned about the future of your console, you don't start hyping up the cloud. It doesn't inspire confidence. My assumption is that down the line, they'll say, hey, Xbox isn't really gone, even if there's not a physical box. Xbox is everywhere. And honestly, all I could say is good luck. Again, huge thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. It's a great service that I think you should check out. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Get started today.